and I came across a conference or a travel summit that was happening close to us in British Columbia, Canada, called the Family Adventure Summit. It's no longer in existence now, but at the time it was like a gathering of traveling families to talk about travel. It was like, oh, this is right up my alley. So we drove up and this was in 2016. So we drove up to Canada, and when we got there, we didn't know what to expect, but I was just thinking, okay, well, the least that will happen is we'll meet, other families and just make new friends. But we ended up talking to a lot of families that were traveling full time and also didn't have like hundreds of thousands of dollars in their savings to do this full time travel. They were working while they were traveling, and that really got my husband and I thinking, because both of us have jobs and skills that we can do online. And so that, essentially we could do it anywhere in the world. And that was one of the main lessons that we learned during that, travel summit was, there's not really anything that's stopping us. We're kind of just stopping ourselves from doing it. And so on the way home, we decided to make a plan to travel, to launch our family within 9 months. And so that was the inspiration, I would say, of us traveling.
Welcome to Travel of Legacy, a podcast that highlights and celebrates the experiences of Black and Brown families who use travel as a means to create and build a legacy. Hear the stories of Black and Brown parents who are building a nest egg of long-lasting memories, resiliency, and worldly perspectives for their young ones. I'm Melanie, the host and creator, the Trinidadian Canadian mother of a pink-obsessed and awe-inspiring princess. Travel of Legacy is a collection of stories that serves to inspire those who are yet to take the leap, so together we can leave behind a world filled of Black and Brown global citizens.
Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Travel of Legacy. Today marks our 11th episode, and I just wanted to take the time to thank everyone who's been there supporting the podcast, who has been sharing, liking, commenting, from the interviewees who have poured their hearts into their stories, who have taken the time out to sit and meet with me, someone who, they didn't even know, before that first email that landed in their inbox asking them to share their stories. To all you listeners who have taken the time out of your day, especially as parents, where we all know that our time is very precious and limited, I really want to say thank you. I'm so filled with gratitude, from the smallest gestures to the biggest ones. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for coming along with us on this journey. Thank you for being transparent and vulnerable in your storytelling. Yeah, I'll just end it at that. But just know that I am really grateful because this podcast isn't what it is today without the stories, without all this collective voice. And so without further ado, I just wanted to have you guys tag along today on Astrid's nomadic journey with her family. Now, spanning from the bustling streets of Tokyo to the tranquil shores of Bali, discover what sparked Astrid and her family's decision to embrace full-time travel, the hurdles they faced, and how it transformed their family dynamic. From homeschooling hacks to sustainable travel tips, Astrid's story is one filled with wisdom and inspiration for wanderers everywhere, and serves as a reminder that every challenge is an opportunity for growth and connection. So we begin today's episode by asking my guest, Astrid, as I usually do, to walk us through what her early childhood memories and experiences have been with travel.
I was born in Indonesia, but then our family moved to the States, to the U.S. when I was a kid. So I basically grew up in the U.S. But we still had family in Indonesia, so we would travel to Indonesia to visit family. And then on summers when we weren't going there, we would either travel around the U.S. or we would go to another country. So as a family, we've gone to like Hong Kong, we've gone to Australia, you've been to Europe as well. So that travel bug, I guess, was instilled in me ever since I was young. And so I hope to pass that on to my kids too. I think I have.
I find it so interesting to hear about what life looked like before a major life decision. Here is Astrid talking about what her daily life consisted of with her family before they embarked on full-time nomadic travel.
I feel we had a pretty typical life. My husband and I worked full-time. We would be in an office. We'd commute into an office. My kids were in school and in childcare. My daughter was in first grade at the time, and then my son was in preschool, primary. So all day daycare, basically. And so we dropped them off in the morning, and then we wouldn't see them until 5 p.m. at night. And then by then, it's like, okay, rush to get dinner, and then it's their bedtime, and then we stay up, maybe watch a movie, and then we'll go to sleep. And then we do it all over again the next day, wash, rinse, repeat, essentially. It just felt there wasn't an opportunity for us to connect, and we also didn't have any family moments together, And so both my husband and I got to a point where we need to do something different with our lives. We need to find something that's going to make us feel a little bit more inspired. And so that was when we decided to try traveling full time.
So now we get to that question of what was it? Was there a specific event or experience that planted the seed for Astrid and her family to embark on full-time travel?
Yeah, we had started talking about it for a few years, but then we didn't really know how we could make that happen. That was when I started getting into blogging as well. So I was actually blogging before we were traveling. And I did a lot of searches for other travel bloggers, other traveling families. And I came across a conference or a travel summit that was happening close to us in British Columbia, Canada, called the Family Adventure Summit. It's no longer in existence now, but at the time it was a gathering of traveling families to talk about travel. Oh, this is right up my alley. So we drove up and this was in 2016. So we drove up to Canada, and when we got there, we didn't know what to expect, but I was just thinking, okay, well, the least that will happen is we'll meet, other families and just make new friends. But we ended up talking to a lot of families that were traveling full time and also didn't have hundreds of thousands of dollars in their savings to do this full-time travel. They were working while they were traveling. And that really got my husband and I thinking, because both of us have jobs and skills that we can do online. And so that essentially we could do it anywhere in the world. And that was one of the main lessons that we learned during that travel summit was, there's not really anything that's stopping us. We're kind of just stopping ourselves from doing it. And so on the way home, we decided to make a plan to travel, to launch our family within 9 months. And so that was the inspiration, I would say, of us traveling.
So listening to Astrid's story, you think, how were they even able to make this possible? Here's what she had to say.
I think the other thing was, a lot of families can be hesitant about taking their kids out of school and what impact that might do for them in their education. And for me, I didn't really have that fear, I think, because I knew from my own experiences as a child, there's so much that you can learn from traveling. And I had family members who had homeschooled their kids, and their kids were never in the traditional school system, and they were, doing great. And some of them grew up to have, very successful careers later on. So I knew that it would be okay for them to get out of the education system. It was more, for my husband and me, it was more about our ability to facilitate that learning with our kids. And so there was some uncertainty for us, but we were, let's just do this. Let's jump into it. And at the time we were thinking it was just going to be 3 years. And so it's 3 years, they'll catch up if they fall behind, they'll catch up with their schools. But fortunately, when we came back, they were way ahead of their peers in many areas. So some of those worries were a little bit unfounded, I think. Yeah.
I was also curious to find out how they went about planning their time away.
Initially, we had this big long list, but we gave each member of the family, we had everybody pick their top 3 countries that they wanted to visit. We kind of try to be a democratic family, although at the end of the day, obviously it's the parents that make the final decision, but we have to give our kids the ability to sort of help make the family decisions. So we each picked 3 places. My son was 4 at the time, so his places were the beach, Africa, and New York City. So none of them were countries, but, we tried to at least allow him, give him some of the stuff that was on his list. So we put together a rough list of 12 countries, essentially. We knew that fast travel wasn't really what we wanted to do, because we'd gone on vacation, 2-week vacations, and we'd come back and we're always exhausted after it. It was fun, but you're packing in 50 million things at once, and then you come back and you're like, oh, I need a vacation from that vacation. So we wanted to be intentional about, we didn't want to burn out, and so that was why we wanted to slow travel, essentially spend a longer time in the destinations that we visited. So we would plan at least a month in each of the countries that we would go to. And then that would give us more time to, learn about the cultures that we visit, do more of day-to-day things. So really get to know how people live their day-to-day lives, instead of just staying at a hotel and eating at restaurants all the time. And so that's where the world schooling component really comes in, is you're learning about this world around you that you can have put yourself in. Over time, our travels, or the country list, shifted just based off of interest, and also based off of what was available. And, you were traveling partially through the pandemic, so some of the countries that were originally on our list weren't open to travelers for a time. And so we just would adjust and kind of reassess. Okay, where do we want to go then? If we can't go here, where's another place we need to go? And we kind of plan out the next country as we were in one country, and then we'd plan out, okay, where are we going to go in the next country? We never really planned too far in advance or bought tickets until maybe a month or so prior, just because things may change.
Even with the final decision made, I was curious to know whether there were any lingering feelings or questions in their mind when they considered what they were about to do.
We were excited. I mean, it was it was something new. Over the years, I've realized like my husband and we work the best when we have like a project or a goal that we can both kind of reach for together. And so this turned into kind of a project for us. Okay, now we have this goal, we have this due date of when we want to launch. Now let's break it up into small tasks. Let's plan out what we need to do so we can get there. And that was, I think that really helped us kind of quell some of the apprehension that we may have felt about, is this the right thing to do for our family? Are we really, are we crazy for, uprooting our whole family and traveling the world with them? But I think being able to have like tasks that we could do and kind of focus on completing and then see the progress that we were making up until, our launch, that really assure us that we were making the right decision.
I then asked Astrid to describe their first time in Mexico.
Mexico was our first country outside of the U.S. That we went to, and it was a new country to us, and so we didn't know what to expect. And I think that first day when we landed there in Mexico City, and we're kind of walking out of our hotel, and it was like, what are we? Like, what is this place? Like, because none of us have been to Mexico. We're familiar with like Mexican food, but we definitely were not familiar with Mexican culture at all. And it was around the Dia de Muertos, Day of the Dead celebration. So there was just a lot of people, a lot of festivities happening. It just felt so different from what we been exposed to in the past, but also good different. So while we had some nervousness about where we were at, you were also, hey, this is really cool. This is something different. So for us,
we continue on where I asked Astrid to trace where her family then traveled to after Mexico.
So we ended up going to a total of 11 countries, including the U.S. and Mexico. So after Mexico, we went to, while we were in Mexico, we did a 2-week trip to Costa Rica, and then we came back. And in Costa Rica, it was really one of our favorite things was going to the hot springs and enjoying the nature over there. And then after Mexico, we flew to Italy and France, spent a month in each of those countries. And then Italy was beautiful, and we stayed at this 400-year-old farmhouse. And then learned all about food production in Italy. And then in France, we were house sitting at a friend of mine's house. And so we got to hang out with her dog and pretend we were French people. After France, we went to Indonesia and spent about 6 months there, island hopping around. I showed my kids, where I went to school in Jakarta. We all took Indonesian lessons in Central Java, and then spent several months in Bali, and then other islands too, like Lombok and the Komodo Islands. After Indonesia, we flew to Singapore for a few days, and then to the Philippines, where we met up with my in-laws, my husband's parents. His mom is Filipino, and she hadn't been back in probably over 40 years. And so that was, it was cool for us to be there with her, and she could experience, the places that she was at when she was a kid, and then, new places with us. After the Philippines, we all went to Vietnam, and that was when the pandemic hit. And we're initially supposed to be there for 2 months, but then ended up staying for 3 just because they closed the borders for a little bit to try and, this was the early days of the pandemic, so they're trying to keep it contained. Once they opened the borders, we went to the U.S. and spent about 7 months in the U.S. And then after that, we went back to Mexico, back to the US. And then we went to the UK. And that was like end of 2021. We were in the UK, connecting with my husband's like culture. So he's half Filipino and the other half is like European, mostly the UK. And so we visited England and we did house sit in Birmingham, which we loved. Then we went to Spain after that. And Spain was actually not on our agenda at all. But again, it was like a pandemic. Some countries were not open, some countries were. We were initially planning to go to Morocco, but we got COVID in England. And so then Morocco wouldn't let us in. And so we're like, okay, what country can we go in then? If, now that we've recovered from COVID, we ended up going to Spain and we loved Spain, stayed there for 3 months. And then came back to Mexico after Spain and then back to the US. And that was the end of our trip. So it was like kind of bouncing around between, Latin America, Asia, Europe, and even this.
I then asked Astrid, what was the experience like taking your kids back to Indonesia and showing them where and how she grew up?
I think for me, it was a way to sort of, share my legacy with the kids, or share part of myself. I really do feel the places that you're in kind of help shape who you are. And so I really wanted them to, my hope was if they see the schools, just even the environment, the malls that I used to hang out as a kid, like, oh, now they get to understand mom a little bit better. And that was sort of how I felt with my mother-in-law too, of just like seeing her with her childhood friends and like how they interacted and like, okay, that explains a lot about like who you are as a person. And I think for my kids too, though, that they get to, in a way, walk in my footsteps, and then they build their own memories in the place that is so important for me. So yeah, it's a lot, kind of going back to that idea of connection. You're like not just, seeing a place, you're kind of connecting with it and building memories in this place that you're visiting.
I was curious to know about Astrid's house-sitting experience. From a personal perspective, it has always been something that I've contemplated. So I asked her, how did the opportunity come about to house-sit?
Yeah, so most of it's one of our like hacks that we like to, travel hacks that we like to do. We don't do credit cards, but we try and do like house sitting. But it definitely is a full-time job if you're trying to find a sit. So we use a site called Trusted House Sitters, and you build a profile as a sitter, and then pet owners will post their sitting opportunity. Like we're looking for a pet sitter to come and stay in our home for 3 weeks or something, or sometimes it's for 2 days. But they will they'll post their requirements for it, and then you apply. Kind of any job, you put your best face forward. You say, these are what we're really good at. And our kids are really responsible and they love to take care of animals and they help out. And so usually I'll put out, like if I'm going to a place, I will put as many applications as I can, I think. And that, out of 50, I'll probably get like 5 people responding. So it's a very low, you really have to put yourself out there, but 5 people will respond and be like, hey, we're interested in having your family come stay with us. And then I will talk to them. I'll do a Zoom call or a phone call or something. Sometimes it's WhatsApp, whatever is, the preferred mode of communication. I'll talk to them and kind of tell them more about myself, and then they will, and I can ask them questions about like what is expected of us as a pet sitter, and then out of that selection, I'll choose maybe 1 or 2, depending on the the timing and stuff. So there's a lot of things that kind of go into it, a lot of logistics of like, does this house fit with, the place that we're going to go to? Does it fit with our timing and things like that? And so it takes a while, but once we do it, when we're actually there, it makes the experience so amazing. We were in Scotland this past summer and spent 3 weeks house sitting a dog in the Scottish borders area, and we stayed in a grandma's house and like walked around her small town, and you had a car, so we got to like take the dog out to like day trips and stuff. It really changes the experience because you're not there as a tourist. You're there like as a visitor. You're still there as a visitor, but you're not touristing as much. And so we would shop at the neighborhood grocery store. We'd go to the neighborhood park and do all sorts of like daily type.
I also asked Astrid about her blogs, specifically how she was able to manage blogging while on the road, and perhaps how it evolved over the years.
Yeah, I tried to write at least 1 or 2 articles about the places that we visit. Sometimes it was hard because, so the first 2 years I was working part-time, mostly as a freelance writer, but then after the pandemic started, I took on a full-time remote job with a not-for-profit based in the U.S. And so, this is, it's hard to like, juggle all of that stuff, right? Like a job, the blog, homeschooling and world schooling the kids too. And so I tried to at least write, an article about each place that we visited to help other families have a similar experience as us, or give people ideas of what the country is about. Initially, my blog was more of just a journal of places that we've been to, but over time it kind of morphed into a resource for other families. I wanted it to be more that instead, just because I felt that was where I could, provide value to the world. And hey, you guys want to travel full time? Here's, the way that we travel full time, or here are the things that we did to get ourselves ready. And, hopefully that can help you. Or you guys want to go to XYZ place. Here are the things that we did to give you some ideas of like what you can do as a family. So it really, after a period of time, like that shift in thinking really helped to make it more like, I feel like make it a better resource for families.
I was really curious to get a better understanding of how Astrid and her family manage the day-to-day life while traveling. Here's what she had to say about juggling work and school with family life.
Yeah, it really depended on where we were at as well, I think. But for the most part, if we were in North America, my husband and I have kind of staggered work hours. So I'll work U.S. East Coast time and he'll work U.S. West Coast. So then there's a 3-hour delay of when he starts work. And that gives him time in the morning to get the kids, wake the kids up, do maybe math with them in the morning when their brain is like the least tired. So he would do the math with the kids. And then once I was done with work, I would do, other subjects with them, writing practice, or we'd watch YouTube videos about the countries that we're at, or we would do some science experiments. And then afterwards, once he was done with work, we would go out into the city that we're at and go either eat dinner or do an evening activity as a family. And then on the weekends, we would do, our day trips or excursions and things like that. More things that would take longer. In Europe, it was a little bit easier to do like activities during the day because we're living we were still working US hours. And so I would start work, in the afternoon or late afternoon. So that would give our mornings and lunchtime free to kind of like wander into the city, go visit a museum, squeeze in like a small museum or something like that, or just take a drive out in the countryside. Asia was a little bit different because of the time zone. That was the harder time zone, but we would do our activities during the day, and then our work hours would be kind of split. So like he would be online with our coworkers half the time, and then the other half we work, what do you call it, asynchronously, like on our own time. So we'd still kind of squeeze in that 8 hours, but it just wouldn't, half of it would be offline for our coworkers. But again, like we adjust based off of our location and what's there, but we try and at least do an outside activity, outside of the house activity each day. And it didn't have to be anything big. It could be just, okay, we're walking to the grocery store today, or we're going to go check out that like cafe on the beach that, we walked by, and that was our activity for the day. But one of the great things about slow travel is that it kind of allows for you to have those small moments, because, and it's okay, it's okay if you spend most of your time inside the house, because you have more time in this place to experience it. And so you can do it at your own pace instead of this breakneck speed of, we have to squeeze in 10 activities into this day so that we can get the most out of this country. So, yeah.
One of the first major considerations when one is thinking about a nomadic lifestyle or any long-term form of travel are the kids. So here Astrid talks very candidly about the kids and how they adjusted.
I think initially it was a little bit rough. I mean, they did enjoy the travel, but they did get, especially my daughter, did get a little bit homesick or missing her friends. She's a very social person. And the transition from traditional school to homeschool was also hardest for her, I think, because she was used to, she had already done, first grade at the time. And both of us were still kind of trying to figure out her learning style and what works the best for her. And then our son was just, he was 4, so it wasn't like he was doing much school anyway. And so the transition to that, I would say the first year of homeschooling was the toughest, just because we were like, okay, let's try and sit down and do these activities. And there was a lot of resistance. And so I had this vision, we're going to cover this and this and this. And then I had to kind of let go of that and be okay with, only doing a writing activity for the day. And then that's all that they can handle. Yeah. So there was definitely some transition in that sense. I think what, the growth that we saw in our kids was seeing them be able to do things on their own and kind of making their own opinions about things. Wherever we went, we would talk about, hey, what do you see? What's different or what's the same as other countries that you visited before? And so I was kind of trying to get them to take in their environment more than just, again, it's not just seeing a place, but really trying to connect with the places that you visit and trying to also personally, how does this make you feel personally? Not just, what is the history of a place, but what is it about this place that you like? What is it that you don't like? What is it that you notice about how people are? That really helps, in my opinion, it really helps the kids kind of have a deeper experience in it.
I then asked Astrid whether or not there were any changes in their nomadic lifestyle and what changes she saw in their family dynamics.
I think the biggest change in our family was really learning how to communicate with each other better. When you're on the road 24/7, you really can't have any, if you're at home, and everybody has their like jobs and school. The life that we had before, if we had a problem, we're like, okay, fine, let's talk about this. Let's talk about this later. And you kind of push it off to the side, and then you forget about it. And then it doesn't come up until like 5 weeks later when something else, oh, remember that time when you did this and this and this. So when you're traveling and you're with the family together all the time, like you really can't do that because it's just going to make for a really bad experience. Like, you're either wallowing or festering in this mood or something. So we really learned to just give each other, at least a few minutes to kind of cool down, but let's talk about it. Let's address it. Let's try and figure out, what it is that's bothering you, what it is that you're feeling, and then we can address that feeling then and there. And that was the biggest change in our family, is really making communication as an important element of our family dynamics, and then also kind of learning about what the culture of our family is and what are our family values and how do our kids like communicate to us. So yeah. And I want to say, like, it wasn't perfect all the time. Like, my social media account will show that we're like, oh, we're having a great time in this and this place. But I don't show that like 5 minutes earlier, one of us was in the worst mood ever and not having any of it. It's just like any other family. I think that like people have bad days, and people also, because personalities will conflict with each other, and it's important to acknowledge that and then work through that.
As you'll hear, Astrid is a huge proponent of sustainability initiatives. So I asked her, how has the time away impacted her views on the topic, as well as cultural awareness?
I think, like, to speak to the sustainability aspect, we really saw, especially when we were in Indonesia and doing a lot of like outdoor, water activities, we really saw the impact of things like plastic, on the environment. And love to snorkel. We love to go in the water and stuff. And when we were there, like, there was a day when I was like snorkeling, and I just snorkeled through a patch of plastic garbage floating in the water. And I was like, this is not good. And so after that, when we were in Mexico, we did a baby sea turtle release. And before that, the kids and I were learning about sea turtles. And we learned that sometimes they'll mistake plastic bags for jellyfish, and then they'll, eat them, and then it kind of gets in their stomach, and then that they don't digest the plastic, it just stays there. So then they will eventually starve or get sick off of it. And the same with plastic straws, they'll adjust that. And so all of that, after several years of kind of seeing it, and not just in Mexico, not just in Indonesia, but in other countries too. And we're like, we should really be more intentional about our own practices. And so that's kind of what led us to have a more intention towards sustainability on our travels. And then sustainability is not just about, the environment. It's also economic impact that you make. We spent a lot of time in Bali, and I had been there as a kid, and that island has changed a lot, and a lot of it is the impact of travelers coming to it. It's like the eat, pray, love effect, Everybody wants to be Julia Roberts in in Bali. But because of that huge influx of tourism, then the economy really shifted and really focused on, became even more of like a service-oriented economy. And that changed. One, it increased the cost of living in that place, but then it also, some of the traditional farming that Bali is known for then became, like, it shifted to become housing, or, hotel development or vacation rentals or things like that. And so people were like abandoning their like traditional stuff, and because they needed to survive in this like tourism heavy economy. And so that, those kind of seeing those things and learning about how tourism kind of has changed some of the places. We learned about that in Venice too, right? Venice now, like most of the homes there are not, inhabited by residents, but are mostly vacation rentals because people go there. And so then it becomes too expensive for locals to live there. And they go, I saw the same thing in Costa Rica, all of these things. And so, as travelers, we kind of are faced with this, I think, cognitive dissonance in a way, because, we are part of that industry that is causing this shift. So what can we do to help kind of minimize that negative impact? What are some things that we can do as a family to counteract that impact? And so that's why for us, supporting local businesses is very important. We try and donate to local nonprofits, that help to build the community up. We try and learn more about the places that we're visiting, instead of just kind of taking the tours and, or instead of just doing the traditional, like the typical tourist stuff. We want to try and experience a place a little bit more to at least help support that economy a bit more.
So in our first chat, which happened to be offline, Astrid mentioned that whenever she's thinking about travel, she's always considering the idea of consumption versus connection. So I asked her to expand on that idea and what it means to her when it comes to travel.
I think one of the first things you could do is, before traveling, like learn about the place that you're going to go to, read a book, or we're very video oriented, so we'll watch YouTube videos about places, and that will give you a better sense of what are the things to, what are the things that you want to experience more of. And we like to visit museums. Not every family I know likes museums, but most cities will have a national museum or something. You kind of get to see the historical parts of the city, or like, I know that it's still very, based off of what the government wants you to see. So then it's, but that's a good starting point as well. I think tours are good if it's, culturally oriented, but also look at who's giving the tour. Is it a local company, or is it, an international chain that just is doing these tours all over the place? And so there's kind of a responsibility as a consumer to do a little bit more research about who is providing the service that you are buying or taking part in. So yeah, go to their website, look at their about page, and see, are they a foreigner, or are they actually local people that have been there for years and really understand the culture. And so that to me is important to do. I think sometimes we tend to view travel as entertainment, and I'm not trying to demonize that. I think there's value in, going on a trip and just relaxing. We did that too. we, one of the things that we love is just finding a beach house and, renting a beach house and going to the beach and stuff. But I think you have to sort of balance that out with the other aspect of travel too, which is that there's so much about the world that we can learn about, and it's kind of a shame. It would be a shame to sort of like go someplace that is interesting and unique, and not really seek out experiences that would help you understand why that's interesting and unique. So to me, the entertainment part of travel is the consumption part, but you kind of have to balance that with the connection. Every place has a story, and so find a way to learn about the story of that place, the history, the social dynamics that exist now, the way that people interact with each other, the culture of it. There's a lot that we can learn about the world. And I think one of the great things about travel is once you see that other people maybe are different from you in some ways, you also can see how they're the same or how they could be similar to you. And I think it helps to make us more like empathetic and more open-minded too.
I then asked Astrid why representation in travel is important to her.
So when I started blogging, this was like even before we were traveling full time. Like in 2016, I decided I'm going to have a travel blog and write about our family's travels. Let's see what other families are blogging. And, I'd type in family travel blog, or I'd do searches of family travel blogs. And I'd find these lists of travel. These are the top 20 family travelers that you need to follow or something. And I would always, the majority of the time, the demographics were the same. Like it was a lot of white families, and also heteronormative families, as people that didn't have any kind of special needs, or at least from what I could see from the screen or their posts. And that really struck me because, I'm a person of color and I like to travel, and I know other families like me like to travel, and I know that it's not just these families that are traveling. And so that was that really pushed me to kind of find a way. I wanted to find a way to change that. And so when I write about, I have my own list of, families to follow, family travel bloggers to follow on my blog. But I was very intentional about making it diverse, because I really wanted people to see that it's not just, white families that are traveling, families of all, backgrounds love to travel. That also is what prompted me to create this, my Instagram page, Brown Families Traveling, was because I really wanted to at least visually change the image of what family travel was about, and really promote families of color that were traveling in the world, and help other people see that this travel world the community is actually pretty diverse.
We then dove deeper, and I asked Astrid what the biggest misconception of Black and Brown families is when it comes to travel.
I think it's that, that we don't travel, or that, that kind of lifestyle is not for us. I'll stick to my, I'll stick to my tried and true thing. We, as a nomadic family, or, digital nomad family, essentially, we didn't really see as many families of color traveling full time as we would have hoped. And so that's one thing. I think one misconception is, full-time travel is not for me. I I can't do that. And so I really wanted to show other families, like other Black and brown families, that, hey, you can do it too. Let's, figure out how, whether it's through savings or through, working remotely, like figure out how you can make it work and then, go out into the world. I think another misconception maybe is that the world is not safe for people like us. And I would say, sometimes we did get our share of, microaggressions. I going into the UK, the immigration official, I think he saw me, and our mistake was that we didn't have an onward ticket. And so that already raised a red flag. But I think he saw me and my family and was like, oh, you guys are just trying to come in here illegally. He already made that assumption about us. And we have had, moments in Italy, for instance, where people assumed, or people would like make comments about us because he looked Filipino or something like that. And so those things do happen, but in general, I think the world is actually, pretty welcoming. When you connect with somebody one-on-one, they'll be able to welcome you into their homes, or they're more willing to welcome you in. And so, yeah, I'm not trying to dismiss, real experiences of, discrimination or harassment or things like that. But I also want to encourage families to be like, don't let that prevent you from going out and experience.
Another hot topic is privilege associated with travel. Given Astrid's family experience, I asked her how she defined travel privilege and how family travel can be used as a powerful tool for teaching kids about it. Here's what she had to say.
Yeah, we're very open about that, and I think you have to balance, or for us, it was like balancing. This was an isolated incident. Is our experience in this place, in this country, like generally positive, or is it generally negative? I think that, with anything in life, like there is always going to be bad moments. Is this bad moment enough to color the rest of our experience? And so putting that into perspective is helpful, and being honest and open with our kids and being like, hey, the world isn't going to be equitable all the time. People still operate with kind of like a white supremacy lens in some cultures. And so that's the reality of us. And I think as Black and brown people, we have to find our own way to address that and also move past it. Yeah. So privilege is also a topic that's important for me, because I know that not everybody can travel, and not everybody has either the funds or the access or the ability to go to places. So I think as somebody that is able to do that, you have a responsibility to kind of acknowledge that privilege as well, instead of like taking it for granted, I think. So when it comes to travel, there's different ways that privilege can manifest. Like, it could be like passport privilege. My U.S. passport allows me the ability to go to countries without having to pay a lot of money to get visas. Sometimes it's like, a lot of times it's free, to enter, and I can stay for many months. And so acknowledging that is important. And also my family and I are privileged in that we do have jobs that we can do remotely, and that allows us to spend an extended amount of time in different places, while still being able to, support our family. I know that some families, they have more physical types of jobs, jobs that require them to be physically in a place. So then that kind of changes, your ability to travel, or, just even physical ability to travel. Some families require more, resources to be able to travel, or their kids are neurodivergent or something. And so they can't do certain experiences because it might be, too stimulating or things like that. And actually, so I think as a family, we try and talk about that with our kids, because we want them to recognize that, there are some advantages that they have over others, or maybe it's not an advantage. Yeah, I guess it would be advantages, but there's some things that they're able to do that other people can't, and to be gracious about it too.
Reflecting on the 4 years of full-time travel, I asked Astrid, when her kids are older, how she would hope they would look back on this time.
I hope they will look back with good memories, with fond memories of hey, that's really cool that my parents, we did that as a family. Because my son was so young, he has forgotten some of the places that we visited early on during our trip. And so I've started putting together photo books of our travels, and then kind of going through them with him and be like, hey, do you remember when you were here? Look this is what you were doing, and blah, blah, blah. It's 7 volumes right now. I think we'll end up being 10 volumes that, I'll just leave it at that. It's a lot. But even if he doesn't remember, even if my kids don't remember every single moment, I think what I would want them to remember is that feeling of being someplace that is new to them, and experiencing something that is different from their norm, and making it and wanting to have those types of experiences again in the future.
To end, this was the most straightforward question that I had for Astrid. I asked her, would you do it again? And if so, would you change anything for the next time? Here's what she said.
Oh, absolutely. I would, if given the opportunity, we would do it again. I don't know if I would change a lot of things. I actually liked how we made decisions as a family, and how we did that. I guess in the beginning, before the pandemic, we wouldn't buy refundable tickets or something, because we're oh, what's going to happen? But I think now we're a lot more hesitant about, or not just about changes, and okay, I'm willing to spend that extra $100 for a refundable ticket, because who knows what might happen. Because we ended up, when we got COVID in London, we ended up losing $3,000 because we couldn't get our flights to Morocco refunded, and we had already booked an Airbnb, and we couldn't get that refunded. And that was kind of a wake-up call for us of, oh, you actually should think about what might happen that is unexpected, and plans or not. So we'll still be a little bit flexible in our plans of where we're going to go next, but also have a safety net.
Thanks for listening to Travel Love Legacy. If you like the show, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review. Doing this really helps me to grow. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Travel Love Legacy. Till next episode, bye.